Second speaker is Tom Gershaw from Microsoft. He's the Worldwide Business Development Director for Windows Azure. He has been with Microsoft since 1994. His current role focuses on the development of strategic partnerships with market-leading companies to accelerate the growth of Azure. The topic of his speech is TV services in the cloud. Let me introduce Mr. Tom Gershaw.
Which one's forward? This one's forward? This one? Okay. Okay, well, thank you very much. It's good to be back in Korea. I was here about a week and a half ago, and it was a little bit warmer, so I came out and I forgot a jacket this time, and the weather changed on me. So I'm going to talk to you today about TV services in the cloud, of which we'll talk a lot about Azure, which is Microsoft's offering, but a lot of the principles we can apply to basic cloud computing on different platforms. And having a problem with my... Oh, that's one. Okay. See. Got to hit the right button. User pilot error. So I think a lot of people have talked about the usage of video on the internet, and I think Chris from Cisco did a good job pointing out just the tremendous growth in traffic, and I think everybody here understands that video will be a dominant form of data on the internet, comprising the vast majority of the bits that are going across the network. And when I talk to partners, I tell them it's the best of times to be in the video business or to be devices receiving video, and it's also the worst of times. It's the best of times because there's so much good video out there, and consumers are so hungry for it that if you have video or you have a device that displays video, there's a ready-made market for it. It's the worst of times because the business has never been so complex. And for companies like Microsoft, we love complexity because we think we can help solve some of the industry issues around the complex model. So that's where I want to talk to you today about the cloud model and how we can help the industry move forward. So we talk about the opportunity, and really the opportunity is exemplified in the blue box that we see there. Actually, those are some of the problems. In the good old days, in the 1990s, if you were delivering a video service, you were mostly delivering it to a set-top box or to a PC. And for the most part, the standards and the formats were well known. Well, today it's a much different game. You have everything from a mobile device to a 70-inch high-definition television set, Xboxes, iPads, tablets, all sorts of devices. And with all these different devices out there, the complexity of delivering content to those devices becomes very much an issue for a lot of content providers, whether that be broadcasters or studios or cable television providers. Plus, what you have are increased scenarios. Again, this is great for business, it's great for the consumers. I can buy video, I can rent it, I can subscribe to it. But each one of those business models is separate, and you need different types of workflows, different types of ways of delivering the content and setting up systems so you can actually deliver on those sets of services. So a whole lot of innovation based on new business models are appearing, but realizing with all those different business models, you have different complexities in terms of handling those workflows. And then finally, there is very little standardization going on in the marketplace today. And in some ways, that's good. Why? Because it hasn't slowed down the pace of innovation. Nobody knew what an iPad was 2 years ago. Yet today, tablets are one of the main driving forces of what we call second screen or end devices. And so what's happened is in the TV industry, in the past, the TV industry, the broadcasters, the manufacturers, the device manufacturers could basically wait 5 years to develop standards. And at that point, new services would roll out. But today, all bets are off because the technology is moving faster than the standard bodies that are responsible for creating those standards. Microsoft loves standardization. We participate in standards bodies all the time, and we're one of the leaders in terms of digital media standardization. We took a leading role in helping draft the adaptive bitrate standard called DASH. We also participated very heavily in the Ultraviolet Consortium, which was an industry play to basically digitize content in a digital locker. And we're very active in trying to get a common content container format. One of the issues that you have in the industry today is that all of these devices right now have to be encoded, encrypted, and packaged in a separate way. And so manufacturers, broadcasters are taking the same piece of content, in some cases basically repackaging that content 20, 30, 40 different times to go out and to hit all the different devices in the ecosystem. So the customers that we're looking at in terms of our cloud solutions span the different segments that we have on the screen under the green box. We deal with broadcasters, we deal with pay TV companies, cable and satellite providers, we deal with studios, we deal with ISPs and ISVs, so the Netflix of the world and the service providers that the Bright Coves and the Kit Digitals that have basically been traditionally looking at developing these workflows are our partners as well. And then finally, one of the things that we haven't really talked about that much at this conference is the enterprise. The enterprise are going to be targets for all these smart devices. So whether I'm doing an internal sales meeting or whether I have external video, enterprises themselves are dealing with the same complexities that the broadcasters and cable companies are. How do I get good, rich video developed in a very cost-efficient way to get to these devices? And so when we talk about the cloud is a great way to democratize, to make simple these complex workflows. And when we talk about video workflows, there's really two different types of video workflows that we're working on. On-demand workflows, or for services like Catch-Up TV, and live or linear TV workflows. The ability to deliver either television broadcasts on a 24/7 basis or live events like the Olympics or World Cup matches. So what we hope to do with cloud computing is transfer that complexity out of the broadcaster, out of the studio, out of the enterprise, and bring it into an environment where that complexity can basically be handled by companies like Microsoft who make their living by solving these complex issues. If you talk to most broadcasters and cable companies, they don't want to be in the business of packaging content. They want to be in the business of delivering great content, delivering great editorial capabilities. And so reducing the complexity helps them achieve this goal. The other thing is scale. When we talk about delivering content broadcasts like the Olympics and doing that over an international set of countries, you need a cloud capability to basically bring scale into this marketplace. So scale and elasticity. So what happens with a major event like the Olympics or World Cup is you'll see your audience spike. And so in the traditional ways of handling these workflows, the broadcaster has to go out and anticipate this spike, has to staff up, has to bring in specialized hardware and software and deal with the audience spike that's going to happen over the 17 days of the Olympics. Once that Olympics goes away, then the broadcaster is left with an overabundance of equipment. So one of the things that the cloud does is takes that burden off of that entity, whether it be a broadcaster, enterprise, or a studio. Why buy when you can rent that capability on the cloud? So what you're going to see here as we talk about the cloud is really what we call a democratization of the capability of delivering video services, whether those be professional services or whether those be enterprise-wide services. And in fact, if we could take out the CapEx equation or reduce it, and we think we can with cloud computing, we can open up the doors for more broadcasters, more content to be created, and thus more services that could make your devices that much more valuable. And cost is one of the big equations. We've started to do our own modeling, and we can see definite cost benefits in terms of renting these workflows versus purchasing them and running them on your own. When Microsoft is building these huge, massive data centers, we can basically build them at scale, reduce the cost of running virtual machines to a point where it becomes very cost-effective for companies to basically rent our VMs versus running their own machines on their premises. And then finally, time to market. Who has the energy, the time, and the know-how to keep up with the next 10 devices that will come onto the marketplace this year that weren't there last year, each requiring its own profile, its own packaging arrangement? So unless you really want to be in the business of solving these technical issues, it's much better to offload them to a cloud provider that can basically provide these to you as part of their services. Now, what we bring to the table in terms of Azure is platform as a service, and I'll talk about that as we go through the presentation. But we have a fundamentally different approach than some of our competitors, where we build more of the services that allow the operator, the broadcaster, to basically just develop applications and top-level services versus building the entire stack, and I'll show you that in another slide. Microsoft also has a rich history of digital media. We helped create the digital media marketplace with our PlayReady and Windows Media DRM systems, with our adaptive bitrate streaming formats, with IaaS media services. So we have a rich heritage in not only building cloud platforms, but building the underlying technologies that most digital video systems are built on today. And we have a rich architectural experience. We've been broadcasting the Olympics since the Beijing Olympics. We handled the Vancouver Olympics, and we just did the London Olympics. The Olympics are a good stress test for any system because they deliver a huge audience, and then if you're delivering the Olympics and it's a 100-yard dash, you can't afford to go dark for a few seconds and miss the entire race, because we'll get immediate feedback from our customers if we fail. So we have a lot of experience in terms of building out and managing these complex systems and workflows on a massive basis. So when we talk about cloud services, this is an interesting diagram for those who aren't familiar with cloud systems. You start on the stack on the left-hand side, which is an on-premises system. In an on-premises system, if it's a video workflow, for instance, you're responsible for managing the entire stack. So you go out, you string together the networking, you do the storage, you're doing the services, you manage the operating systems, the middleware. In fact, you're running the entire IT department. And as I said before, unless you're really in that business, you don't want to be in that business for your video services. When you do infrastructure as a service, like some of our cloud competitors are doing today, and Microsoft will offer an infrastructure as a service play as well, you're offloading a set of services to that cloud provider. You're allowing the cloud to do the networking, the storage, the servers, and the virtualization, but you still have to basically manage everything else in that blue layer. When you do platform as a service, what we're doing is we're building out as many stories of this building as possible. If the video workflow is a 10-story building, with platform as a service, you've taken 7 or 8 of those floors. And so if you're a content provider or a service provider, then you just basically have to finish off the applications and do some data integration. So it allows you, again, to get to market that much more quickly and that much more cost effectively. And then finally, software as a service is where you've offloaded the entire workflow to a third party or you're doing it yourself. So what do we anticipate the next generation media-based platform to be in the cloud? Well, we're going to talk about what we call media processors. This is the digital media workflow of the future, much of it which is being done today on-premise at significant cost and complexity. With Windows Azure Media Services, you can upload or offload any one of these capabilities to the cloud. So we'll talk about how we can ingest content very efficiently into the cloud, how we can encode it, how we can transform it. You know, there are multiple different formats that need to be met to deliver the content to the various ecosystems. If you're delivering it to an iPad or an iOS system, you have to deliver it in HLS format, which is a proprietary format that Apple has for adaptive bitrate streaming. If you're delivering it to a Microsoft ecosystem, you can deliver it in smooth streaming, that's our format, or Dash, which is the industry format that we're promoting. If you're in an Android system, you can use smooth streaming, you can use HLS, and you'll be able to use Dash. But in essence, what has to happen is you take the files into the cloud, you then basically program them into profiles that will meet the devices that you wanted to deliver it, and then the cloud transforms those into the formats that are intended for the devices. So again, all this is automated for you, it's offloaded for you by the cloud. You can then protect the content. We have a play-ready digital rights media system, but we'll also support Widevine or Access, Adobe's format. So you have to, in a cloud platform, and Microsoft's philosophy is we support Microsoft technologies and we also support third-party technologies that are necessary to enable the content flow to various devices. And then we'll talk about on-demand streaming, which is basically what's happening today with a lot of services like Netflix. And then the real next technical hurdle is doing the live streaming, doing the ingest directly into the cloud from the stadium or from the satellite news feed and transforming that content and delivering it directly to the devices from the cloud. We heard a lot about analytics, so there is a lot of technology that will basically be available to extract data from these workflows that are important in terms of monetization. And then obviously advertising. Advertising has to be a key part of the workflow. So Microsoft's view on building a cloud system is what we call a multi-tenant platform. We are basically there to help enable third-party solutions. We're not delivering a first-party service like an Amazon or a Netflix. We're there to be a development platform, much like what we did for PCs and what we've done for servers. We're creating a development platform in the cloud that will be open and robust and will allow for third-party service generation and delivery. So what you'll see from Microsoft's cloud strategy is that you'll see various ISVs and ASPs, Microsoft technology mixed with the best third-party technology to allow our customers and partners the most flexibility. And it's there to basically allow our customers and partners to build their own workflows to meet their needs. And if we're successful, and these are our goals in terms of what we want to accomplish, the workflows that we enable in the cloud have to be assembled very quickly and easily. Otherwise, if you can do it with less complexity on the premise, you'll do so. So one of the goals that we have from a Microsoft perspective, and you'll see this, is how do you assemble a workflow in a very easy and effective way? And open and flexible. Again, we're supporting open standards, and we want to basically provide the flexibility where customers can pick the technologies that make sense for them in constructing these workflows. And then finally, we have to be cost effective. One of the basic premises of the cloud is that you can rent the capacity cheaper than what you would do in terms of purchasing this CapEx expense yourself. And that's something that's being proven out not only by Microsoft, but by Amazon and others in the cloud space. So how can you use media services? And so some of the companies that we're talking to are in the right-hand column there, broadcasters, network operators, content owners, and enterprises. They can come up to the cloud and they can choose to use part of the cloud. Say they just want to ingest content and encode it and then have it delivered back to their premises, they can do that. Some of the way that cloud will be used in the beginning stages of the evolution of the marketplace is to offload demand spikes. And so if you have a big broadcast coming, if you just got rights to the NBA season and you're doing 2,000 basketball games during that the winter time frame, you can offload that workflow to the cloud, rent that capacity, and then basically offload it when that season is done. You can also go through and connect as many of the elements in that workflow as relevant to your company, and basically pick and choose which ones might be appropriate for your use. Eventually, though, we think that the entire media play will basically be on the cloud. You'll do all your on-demand, your catch-up TV, and your live streaming. And then we have our own CDN, but we also partner with Akamai Level 3 and others that are out there to give our partners the ability to basically mix and match and not get locked into one vendor versus the other. And of course, the ability to deliver across a wide range of devices is important. So that's one of the capabilities that we're providing in terms of our solution. And as I mentioned before, various business models need to be supported: rental, subscription, purchase, as well as free delivery. So this diagram shows you both from an architectural as well as a business perspective in terms of how we're constructing our media services platform. So here you have the basic Azure core platform. This is your compute, your storage, and your bandwidth. What Microsoft has done is basically wrapped and added a digital media services fabric, which does resourcing, scheduling, and security of what we call media processors. And a media processor is anybody that wants to develop a service and have it run on a virtual machine tied into this fabric and managed in this environment. So we've have partnerships with various third parties as well as Microsoft technologies that customers can choose from. So we've partnered with a company called Aspera, for instance, which is a company that basically provides fast file transfer of large video files over the public internet in a secure fashion. So if you're a broadcaster or a studio, you're transferring terabytes and sometimes petabytes worth of data into the cloud. You're ingesting that on a monthly or daily basis. You can come in and select an Aspera-like service or Aspera service for that ingestion, and there'll be other ingestion methods there for you. The next the next media processor is encoding. So here you have a choice of encoders. There are various third-party encoders like Harmonix, Digital Rapids, Atem, that you can choose from to basically do the encoding of your files to meet the needs of the devices that you have here. So you basically ingest a mezzanine file, and then you encode it to meet the needs of the types of clients that you want to deliver here. And so as in that chart I had before, you had various formats. If you're delivering to a mobile device versus an HD TV, you're going to encode that in a different profile. So you transfer the file in once, and then it gets packaged into different profiles depending on the devices that you want to reach with that file. So you pick your encoder. Then you basically can use our origin services to disseminate this into a CDN. And then you can use the job media scheduling capability to transform the file into the appropriate format, be it HLS, smooth streaming, or Dash. And then finally, you can wrap that into content protection. So you can protect that file. You can protect that file so it can only be downloaded, it could be streamed, it could be rented, or it could be purchased. So the blocks in the blue here are basically your on-demand workflow. And if you're a broadcaster, it's as easy enough to coming up into our portal, basically going into our portal and choosing the various ingredients that you want to assemble in terms of your on-demand workflow. The workflow is then enabled. It can be enabled for a day, a week, a year, and at the end of the month, you get a single bill from Microsoft on the technologies that you've used and the amount of resources that you've used. So it's as easy as that in terms of putting together an on-demand workflow. So what this means for the TV device manufacturer and what this means for the industry is we want to bring this system, and the system is deployed in 10 different data centers around the world, including one that we just opened in Shanghai, China. So if you're a content provider literally anywhere in the world, you can come up to Azure, rent our cloud, and basically deliver an on-demand service to a connected TV device tomorrow or the next day. So it's that type of liberalization that we want to basically reinforce into the industry. We've seen other speakers talk about the ability to deliver more and more broadcast content. This is, in essence, a content generation machine that can be used in any country for delivering on-demand content. The next workflow that we're enabling is in the green blocks, and this is your live workflow. This is your 24/7 live TV broadcast channel that will be up and running on Azure 365 days a week. So here we're ingesting the content directly from the stadium or from the satellite. It's a live feed that's coming in. It's being encoded, similar to the encoding process here for on-demand, but this is basically happening real time. So it's you've set up the profiles. You want to hit Android devices. You want to hit iPads. You want to hit Xboxes. It's basically being ingested, encoded into that file format, and then delivered through the live origin services built around analytics, ad insertion, and then identity management. So you'll have at your disposal a complete broadcast system that you can enable, again, by coming up to Azure, setting the workflow up, and then tearing it down after you've had your event. Now, the other thing that these workflows do is, through a single set of REST APIs, enable what we call a build-on partner, or a software as a service partner. So you saw in my previous slide, we talked about software as a service. So these are your Kit Digitals, your Brightcoves of the world. These are folks who can build out the complete end-to-end system for the broadcaster, for the TV manufacturer. So they're also part of our ecosystem, and we've heard that word mentioned a lot today as well. So what you have here is an example of an ecosystem. You have a marketplace that has various third-party partners that are there to basically assemble these workflows, and then you have a set of software as a service providers building an end-to-end solution on the same base of technology. And then when you get over to the right, you'll see various content libraries. We'll also obviously support our own Windows libraries, but we'll support HTML, we'll support Flash. Basically, we have porting kits that can be developed and put into any connected TV device. So you'll have a library of client devices that you can choose from. And then finally, the CDN partners. A lot of our partners want multiple CDN strategies. They don't want to be locked into a single CDN provider. So you'll have the ability to choose either Microsoft CDN or one of our partners' CDN. So again, a complete ecosystem, if you will, that will enable on-demand and live workflows through a whole host of devices that you can deliver content to, or if you're a manufacturer, receive content from. So I talked about Azure Media Services and what the live challenge is. Live streaming obviously is much more intense. With an on-demand workflow, you have much more planning that goes into it. You can ingest the files, you can take time to prepare them. With a live model, there's very little margin for error. So if you're broadcasting a news event, the World Cup, the Olympics, presidential election or debate, you're taking the live stream in and you're doing all these content transformation activities live, real time, and so there's very little margin of error that has to go. So this is one of the big technical challenges that Microsoft is taking on with solving the live services scenarios that I talked about. One of the ways that we've done this, and one of the advantages that I think Microsoft has, is the ability to have done this across multiple continents with large live events. And the biggest one in history just took place a couple months ago in London with the London 2012 Olympics. So we had over 1 billion people on this planet for 17 days watching this TV event. And it's now a milestone event not only for the broadcasters but also for the device manufacturers and the TV manufacturers, because there's such now a promotional aspect of this massive TV event that it's reshaping the technical landscape. Broadcasters, technology partners like Microsoft look at the Olympics as really the key stress test for delivering these services, because nothing else can compare in terms of scale and scope with the Olympics. And it's a great way for TV manufacturers and device manufacturers also to promote their technology as well. So for the London 2012 games, Microsoft was one of the cloud providers that basically delivered the entire experience, both on demand and live. And as I indicate in this first bullet point up here, it really was a milestone event for the broadcasters. The broadcasters that we worked with really had no idea what the popularity would be on the Olympics going into the event. What it turned out was a stunning success for the broadcasters. They were able to increase their size of their audiences, get their audiences more engaged by delivering all the live events. And that was, one of the big things that NBC found out is there's a lot of money to be made when you're delivering a great user experience. And they basically sold $1 billion of ads across 17 days. And one of the things that drove them there was the ability to get every athletic event streamed and delivered live to their user base. So I think this now sets the bar in terms of live television can now be delivered safely and securely through a cloud platform. Some of the statistics here you can see. The usage is growing dramatically from the Beijing Olympics, where you had 75 million video streams, to 159 million video streams. The amount of, and then obviously comparing that to Beijing, which was 20. So this is just going to grow and grow and grow. The amount of web-delivered video streams is just the beginning right now. I think we just basically, we're probably about 10% of where this platform will take us in terms of capacity into the future. And the other thing that we witnessed in the Olympic events is that second screen usage didn't cannibalize the broadcast TV event. In the household, it actually increased it. And so if you had if you didn't have any second screen devices, any tablets, any mobile phones, any PCs, you were running about 4 hours of consumption for an average US family. Once they brought in a second device, that went up to 6 hours. When they had multiple devices, the usage increased even more. The other thing that we noticed is that mobility became an important part of the viewing event. 35% of the devices that were receiving content over the web were mobile devices. What was happening during the week was very interesting. Most of the user base was watching on PCs. Why? Because they were watching it at work. And so when they were at work, it was mostly PCs. On the weekends, they had mobile devices, and they were watching more on the mobile devices. So what Microsoft did as part of the Olympics is that we partnered with an ISV called Delta Tray, which is well known in terms of delivering our SaaS solution. Delta Tray basically built out the player frameworks and also the content management system. And then we also partnered with Akamai as the CDM provider. And we provided video services across 4 different national broadcasters across 4 different countries. One of the most impressive things that we did is we did 30 live channels simultaneously. So at any given time, the broadcaster had the ability to go on to their device, and the consumer basically had this, and choose any of the 30 events that were going on at that time. And then, As I said before, we are agnostic in terms of our reach, so we deliver it across Flash, iOS, Android, Silverlight platforms, Windows phones, Xbox, Android devices. So you really need to basically have that type of capability. And then the other thing that we, as we saw, is that innovative and interactive services are driving more consumer engagement. And I think we're seeing that in some of the demos outside, as well as what we saw during the Olympics themselves. So the key takeaways that I want to leave with you today is that we're really on the forefront of a revolution here, really looking at providing a platform that will be unprecedented in terms of bringing out new content for these types of devices. So the first part of the revolution was basically building out these cool devices that could display this content. The next part of the revolution is basically democratizing the cost and the complexity of delivering more and more content to these devices. So that's well on its way. And as a device manufacturer, I would encourage everyone in this room to seek out a cloud strategy. How do I basically use the cloud to differentiate my devices? Whether that be through delivering new interactive services, updating the devices, or delivering more content. You can use the cloud as a way of differentiating your devices. And our mantra at Microsoft is we want any media on any device delivered from the cloud. So thank you for being an attentive audience. I'll take any questions that anybody might have.
Please raise your hand to ask questions.
This gentleman right there.
자세한 설명 감사드립니다.
잠깐만요. Mr. Gershaw, you have a...
Oh, I don't have one.
클라우드에 대해서 많이 강조를 하셨는데요. 클라우드 기반에서 그 미디어 아키텍처를 보시면 그 유저까지 전달하는 굉장히 미디어 쪽은 사이즈가 크기 때문에 트래픽에 대한 문제를 해결해야 되는데 유저까지 전달하는 데 있어서 그 전송 속도가 충분히 지금 MS에서 제공하는 서비스에서 유저들이 충분히 만족을 하고 있는지 어떤 디바이스든 간에 거기까지 전달하는 데 있어서 단말에서의 속도는 충분히 나온다고 보는데 전달 과정에서 속도가 나오고 있는지 문제가 있으면 어떻게 해결하고 있는지 그런 자세한 게 좀 궁금합니다.
Okay. So there's a couple things that are going on here in terms of the question was how can we ensure that there's good delivery speeds? I assume on more of the live services than on the on-demand services, but I'll address both. For the on-demand services, we have the concept of basically reserving capacity on the cloud. So on an on-demand workflow, you have much more buffer in terms of delivery time, but it still could be a problem. If you have 10 terabytes of video files coming in, and you need to have those processed within a few days, then you need to basically have the capability of reserving the capacity on the cloud to turn those files out, to basically repackage them, program to encode them, and encrypt them, and to schedule them out. So within Azure, you have the ability to basically reserve capacity when you need it, and this can be done on a daily basis. And so if you're doing an on-demand workflow and you know how long the system takes to process your workflow based on historical data, you can go up and actually reserve 100, 1,000, 2,000 virtual machines, and that can process your on-demand workload very effectively and efficiently. And after that spike goes down, you're then not charged for that capacity. So that's on the on-demand side. The harder question is really on the live ingestion, and that was something that we had to work with on the Olympics. So when you're taking in a live sporting event, you need to make sure the latency is not disruptive to the viewer. So if you're watching a soccer game, you don't want to basically have a big delay and have the winning goal happen 5 minutes and hear all the crowd basically around you signaling that the game is over. So part of that is the architecture that goes into the system. We had very low latency during the Olympics. We were probably there 30 seconds, less than 30 seconds in terms of the actual satellite feed coming into the system, and then the origins basically lining that up for distribution into the CDN. But we also rely on our CDN partners for part of the delivery. So part of the art here of doing a live event is having not only the cloud-based system be available at a low latency capability and architected properly. And that's one of the things that we learned to do by doing the Olympics, is to how to set up your origin services to make sure that you have that low latency. But you're also relying on the CDN. And so you could have the very best cloud platform, but if the CDN isn't architected to deliver that content load effectively, then you'll get disruptions. So it's really about coordinating the live workflow, making sure that it's architected properly, you have the right amount of origin servers that are out there, and then working through your CDN partners to make sure that you have an adequate service level for live broadcast. There's another question.
예, 저도 문화방송 미래전략실장 안태호입니다. 저도 똑같은 질문인데요. 저희가 그 스포츠 같은 걸 해외에서 중계할 때는 이 화질이나 이런 것 때문에 사실은 위성 같은 걸 미리 청약을 하고, 그러니까 트래픽을 이 트랜스폰더를 확 아주 이렇게 저희가 전용으로 쓰는데, 지금 말씀하시는 이 어주어를 통하면 그런 예약을 안 해도 언제든지 원하는 퀄리티가 확보되는 건지, 그리고 그런 케이블이나 해저 케이블이나 위성 대비 값이 많이 비용이 훨씬 싼 건지, 그거에 대해서 좀 구체적인 데이터를 좀 말씀해 주셨으면 고맙겠습니다.
Okay. So the question was...
Mr. Gershaw,
Yeah.
use mic.
Okay. So
The interpreter cannot hear you well.
Okay, can you hear me now? I guess you can. So the question was one of quality. How can we ensure that the video has adequate quality? And that was one part of the question. And part of that is the way that we use adaptive bitrate streaming, what we call, in Microsoft's version is called smooth streaming. So what happens in the encode process is that because delivery over the internet is much more variable than delivering over a cable network where you have a managed service with quality of service guarantees. The internet is not a managed network, and so there are various swings that happen based on the amount of bandwidth that you have available. So with adaptive bitrate streaming, what happens is you actually encode that file in multiple formats, sometimes up to 16 different formats, depending on the amount of bandwidth that's available to the end user. So the device, the client, actually signals to the server, hey, I have only 500K of bandwidth. Give me a file that can show a good quality picture at 500K, versus we encode all the way up to 3.5 meg for some of the high-def pictures that we get. So it is variable depending on how much bandwidth you have. If you have a mobile phone and you only have 500K of bandwidth, you're not going to get a high-def quality picture. We just can't do that. What we can do is we can give you a good enough picture where you could watch it on a mobile device and get a good experience out of it, but it won't be high def. you actually need 2 to 3 megabits of bandwidth to produce a high-def quality image. That's probably not an issue for most consumers here in Korea because the bandwidth connections to the houses are so good. But in other countries, it does become a problem. But with adaptive bitrate streaming, that helps with the quality issue very, very much so. So that's one of the technologies that we use. And I think the second part of the question was the cost. How do we know how much this would cost versus delivery of these systems over traditional systems? Well, one of the things that we've done so far, and we've done the analysis more on the on-demand side than on the live side. By the way, our schedule for releasing these services on Azure is the on-demand services are going to be available in the marketplace starting in January. So we're releasing the on-demand workflows in Azure in January. The live workflows will be available in test mode in the spring and then available for commercial release next summer. So we're very much now more looking at the cost of the on-demand workflows. And from what we're seeing in our data in terms of the on-demand workflows is we think we can get 30% reduction, maybe 40% reduction in terms of doing these workflows in the cloud, renting the VMs, doing the workflows in the cloud versus somebody basically staffing up, buying the capital expense equipment and doing this on the premise. I don't have firm data in terms of the live services. We have some preliminary data, but I'd want to wait a little bit further before I mention in terms of the savings on the live workflow.
Okay, more questions can be asked at the Q&A session after this session.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tom Gershaw.
Thank you.